Everyone, it's Fionna Gossling from Royal LePage, and I'm here with Sebastian Albrecht, who's also from Royal LePage but works out in Vancouver. And Sebastian and I started our real estate careers together in about 11 years ago in the Westside office of Royal LePage in Vancouver. So I know Sebastian really well, and I know how he works. The reason I do these interviews is I think it's a really good opportunity to introduce agents from across the country that I know are really good and have experience working with them. So if you're ever in the Vancouver real estate market and needed somebody to talk to, he's a great person to get in touch with. So, hi, Sebastian.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi. I feel like it could be the internet connection in my office, which doesn't bode well for my office, but hopefully you can hear me okay and it doesn't cut out too much. Okay, good. So Sebastian, do you want to tell people a little bit about where you work specifically? Vancouver is a pretty big geographic area.
Yeah, it's a little confusing, I think, for people that don't live here, but I work specifically in the city of Vancouver. So there's many suburbs that make up Greater Vancouver, but I sort of remain within the confines of the city of Vancouver and don't stray from those.
And you grew up on the west side of Vancouver and you live on the east side of Vancouver now, so you pretty much cover Vancouver and downtown, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So Vancouver split in most people's minds between the east side and the west side of the city. And there's also, what's that?
In locals' minds.
Yes. And and then there's the downtown peninsula. So I cover all of those areas.
Yeah. Nice. And you work with a partner?
That's right. I work alongside Duncan Brown.
Nice. And how long have you guys worked together for?
It is now just over 3 years, I believe, 3.5 years, I think.
Nice. So I also know Duncan well. So Duncan worked out of the Westside office as well when I was there and has been a really top producing agent for a long time. So I know it was kind of a logical, or it wasn't much of a surprise when you two decided to team up together, because I think you run your business in kind of a similar way and complement each other well. So, yeah. But you work with your clients, right? Duncan.
That's right. So if somebody hires me, if I go and meet somebody to talk about listing their home, they work exclusively with me. Duncan's in the background, and I think that's where there's some added value in that. We confer with one another about our listings or our buyers, and are constantly, with the buyer. I'm aware of his clients and what they're looking for, and I'm keeping an eye open for what they might need. And we consult with one another when there's issues that we might be facing with our clients, and try to solve problems together and help them with their ultimate goal of finding a home or selling a home.
Nice. And is there a certain property type that you specialize in, or do you do kind of everything?
Yeah, we don't do commercial, so we do only residential real estate in the city of Vancouver, and I think going back to that earlier question, that's something to stress a bit too, because it's not very common in our marketplace that people only focus on one city.
Right.
Duncan and I have sold actually just over 1,200 properties in the city of Vancouver alone, and so we don't. The city itself is complicated enough that we don't want to stray, and we could go out to Chilliwack or to Surrey and sell a home there or help a buyer there, but we don't think we'd be adding much value. We concentrate our efforts on the city of Vancouver, and within the city, then you have typically condos, townhouses, or houses. Condos and townhouses have become much more common, and they just sell much more frequently. So in practice, we end up selling more in numbers of those. We do sell quite a few houses as well.
Yeah, and is that generally a price point thing, do you think? Like just from an affordability point?
Absolutely, yeah. So they're considerably more expensive, and once people get into a house, they don't tend to move very often. So one of our clients might buy a house and not move for 10 to 20 years. Whereas if they buy a studio apartment, they might meet a new partner in a year and decide to sell in a year or two, right? So those end up flipping much more frequently.
Totally. And what is the news headlines talk about Vancouver and how unaffordable it is? I know that 8 years ago it was already pretty unaffordable, and it's just become significantly or increasingly so. What is the average sale price of a property or a condo and townhouse there?
Yeah, so I mean, things have changed a little bit in the last couple of years. Houses have been relatively flat and are starting to decline for the last 2 years.
Housing prices have.
What's that?
Housing prices have?
Yes.
Like for a detached home?
Detached home, yeah. So as an example, on the west side of Vancouver, they've declined about 10% year over year, and on the east side, 5%. And then for townhouses and condos are relatively flat, but anecdotally, you'll see prices a much greater value in the marketplace, and the townhouse market is down about 3%, 3 to 4%, both east side and west side. So as far as prices go, in absolute terms, they are unaffordable, in particular compared to most of the rest of Canada. We have on the east side, it's about 1.5 million for a house, is the typical house in East Vancouver.
And say that again, 1.5 for a typical house in East Van?
Yes, that's
and
right.
Is that is the house nice enough at that price?
At that price, it would be adequate, but I would say, I think it's a challenge for people from other parts of Canada where the price points are considerably lower, and you're paying for the improvements on the land predominantly, and the land is very valuable. So in most other parts of Canada, what you're buying is a pretty nice home. In Vancouver, you're paying for the land, and many people, I think, once they buy a property, they're just glad to own something. And so, yeah, at 1.5, it's a decent house, but it's not luxurious by any means. And so in East Vancouver, you'd probably be spending more towards the $2 million price point to get a house that would be. And
is that are you getting a Vancouver special for $2 million?
You'd probably get one that's renovated. Yes. So
Vancouver special, for people who don't know, are the ugliest houses ever made.
Thank you. I live in one.
I'm sure the inside is very nice. They are.
It's true. I do live in one, but when I was a kid, we used to feel bad for people who grew up in them because they were considered to be pretty ugly. Things have changed a bit in recent years, where they've become much more attractive to I think people that appreciate a sort of a modern aesthetic, and they're I think that the hit on them has always been that they were fairly boring and uninteresting. But the positive now is that they're fairly easy to renovate, so you can transform them.
And there's whole blogs and people that are dedicated towards cool architecture in them, so you can save them.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that they're brought up so frequently in our marketplace is that they're the most common type of house. They don't have exact numbers on them, but basically every block in the city has at least one, and there's some blocks that are almost 100% Vancouver special. Yeah.
Okay, and then the west side, is that still, for a detached home on the west side, is that still just
3.3 would be just under 3.3 million is the current typical home on the west side. But prices have been declining on the west side significantly more, and specifically for detached homes more than any other property type. So that's down about 10%.
Wow.
Last year. So we had a peak at sort of in the fall of last year.
The fall of last year, so after the land transfer tax came in?
Yeah, it took a little while for, you know, prices were still rising a little bit
Right.
as the market was weakening. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Um, and so where do you see opportunity in your market right now for people who are trying to get in?
Uh, well, I mean, we're seeing investors stepping into the market in the last few months because it's more of a regular market that we're seeing at the moment. You know, you can actually have subjects in your offers. Properties don't necessarily sell after one weekend.
Yeah.
Buyers can come into the marketplace and actually take their time in trying to find the right home for them. And then when they find it, they can do their due diligence adequately and without a rush. So you know, we're seeing investors who are seeing an opportunity now to buy at a bit of a discount while things are on sale, and to take their time in finding the right property that'll suit them. But at the same time, you know, sorry.
Are they investing? It couldn't possibly cash flow, could it? If you're buying,
Generally
can you
not.
buy?
Vancouver's not. Vancouver's not the place that you're generally going to find a cash flowing property. It there's a lot of investors out there looking for property, and I would say in general, what investors are doing is counting on appreciation,
Right.
And the rents will catch up. And so generally, I find, you know, it's taking about 3 years, 3 to 5 years at the maximum to cash flow on a property. The, the opportunity might be a little greater on a detached home. You know, with a condo or a townhouse, you're facing the maintenance fees on top of the taxes, and that's really where it gets beyond your ability to cash flow. So you might, let's say, on a studio condo or a one bedroom condo, you might be having to add $100 or $150 a month to cover your expenses.
Yeah.
Your you know, our vacancy rate is below 1%. So the pressure is for increasing rents, and so you can pretty typically add that money to your rent in pretty short order.
Right.
Yeah.
You just need a quick turnover.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that does happen more often than not. Like, we don't tend to see tenants who stay for really long periods of time. I mean, it depends on the product and the area, but I'm thinking specifically of a downtown condo. You know, most tenants at most would probably be staying for 2 years. Now they might extend from 1 year to a second year, but it's not incredibly common to have a tenant for 10 years unless you're charging really below market rates.
Right. And what about new builds? Is there still opportunity there? Like when I left, I don't know if you remember, but people were really were spending everything, buying all new builds, betting on them going up so much in value by the time they completed. And then 2008 happened, and they hadn't realized the money, and they weren't going to be able to assign the contract. So that created a big glut.
Yeah. That experience gave people pause a bit,
right?
Because that was a difficult transition into a you know, a year where we saw a significant correction. So since then, for the most part, developers realized they're leaving too much money on the table, I would say, and so there was a time where there was almost a discount to buy pre-sale versus something already constructed. In more recent years, the developers are charging a premium for their product. So it's more like buying a brand new car. And the risk is then on the buyer that the market will continue to rise. So people have made good money on that still, but basically only because values have continued to rise. Personally, I still see that as a big risk, and I'm not a huge proponent of buying pre-sale property. I would much prefer clients of mine to buy something that exists, and we can limit their risks significantly that way.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's always seemed like a gamble.
Everything is basically weighted in the for the advantage of the developer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Although remember that condo at Main and 13th or 14th or something, and they were selling out all of these units, and you could buy a 1-bedroom for $300,000, and I still regret not doing it all the time.
I think, you know, that's sort of a truth of Vancouver real estate. Like, really, any point in the last certainly 30 years, or 40 years. I mean, when my parents bought a house in Vancouver before I was born, people thought they were crazy because they were paying so much money, and it was like $40,000 that they paid for a house. Right. And you know, we look back, you know, 5 years ago, I wish I'd bought more real estate. 10 years ago,
I sold my condo.
Yeah,
but hey ho. Anyway, so I guess I just wanted to have a quick chat and introduce you to people. If anybody was looking to buy in Vancouver, if they live in Vancouver now and are thinking about getting into the market or moving up in the market or downsizing in the market or investing, Sebastian has a lot of experience in all of those areas and would be a really great guy to talk to.
Thanks, Fiona.
Okay, and I will, I'll talk to you soon. I'm not sure if when I click end, I get to still talk to you. I hope I do.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye. No.
I've clicked end. It could still, oh no, it's still.
Oh yeah.
I really need to learn how to